come and sit down. Oh, look, everybody's so obedient. This makes me so happy. You know, some crowds, you know, you can't get them to sit to save your life. So thank you. So we're going to, you know, keep with the theme here. Talk more about social display. Eli Goodman from ComScore, I think most of you saw him, did a kind of a really good job of kind of laying the land of what's going on in social ads right now. And so that does kind of lead me to the question, or I don't know if it leads you guys to the question because you're all on social, so maybe you've all drank the Kool-Aid. That was just an observation, not a criticism. You know, of whether display advertising in social really is better. The reason that this is such an interesting topic right now is if you look at something like the unique visitor numbers of, you know, a relatively old line property like Yahoo, and look at all the trouble that they're having, and then you look at Facebook, and we all know what's going on with Facebook, and you know, and yet, and so it kind of begs the question of you know what really goes on in, you know, display and social that really differentiates it or not from the other kinds of display. The other thing I think that happens in this industry a lot is that people get all excited about a certain property and they all flock to it, and then something else comes along and they all flock to that. And Facebook, I would argue, is a different animal because it is so big and so overwhelming in the likes we've never seen, or maybe we saw it with Google and that's about it. So at any rate, that's kind of what gave birth to this session. So our moderator is a fellow media poster, Erik Sass. Raise your hand, Erik. Erik covers like every media platform that exists, right? You cover like skywriting too?
Sure, yeah,
yes. Yes,
so
yes. Really analog, but very cool. And he really has like the whole lay of land. So I think he's a really good person for this. And he also is like a history geek. And one day I'm waiting for your book, The History of Social Media. Is that going to come out, Erik?
Maybe, hopefully.
Oh, okay, okay. With that, I'm going to give it over to the panel. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I have a panel of esteemed experts here. I'm going to just go through and introduce them by name, and then I'm going to give them each like 15 seconds, no more, to talk about what their company does. To my left, I have Jeff Bernstein, EVP, Global Managing Partner, Universal McCann. To his left, Giles Goodwin, President of Product and Technology, co-founder for Flight. To his left, Chase McMichael, President, CEO, Infinigraph.com. To his left, Michael Nassif, Director, Digital Business Development for Media Networks. And down at the end, last but not least, Mr. James Yancey, Vice President, Global Strategy for Ignition One. And if you guys could just quickly say what your companies do, then we'll move into the questions. Who goes first? You go first.
Yeah, so I run the San Francisco office for where we have clients like Wells Fargo, Schwab, Microsoft, Cathay Pacific. We serve as overall media AOR as well as digital, and we also serve as a hub for North America for digital for So we also service a lot of other clients out of San Francisco like MasterCard, Johnson & Johnson, Chrysler, that don't live in our office, but we do work on them digitally.
So Flight is an ad tech platform really focused on making ads great and marketers agile. We work a lot with brands, publishers, and all sides. We're here in San Francisco.
I'm Chase Michael, co-founder and CEO of Infinigraph. Our primary focus is crowdsourcing social interaction around content, and we've created a behavior and intent platform for measuring social interaction around content. And we've partnered with Flight to distribute content within ads, and we're seeing some great success. So check out the promoted tweet that's up there, little plug. And so I'm happy to be here and look forward to talking with you.
So I don't know if you've all noticed, but the media uniform for men is clearly displayed right here today. So M&I is a division of Time Inc. Our whole focus is on geo-targeted campaigns. I'm director of digital for the unit, and we've got 30 offices all throughout the United States, do about 1,000 national campaigns that are typically scaled down to local for our clients, taking advantage of all sorts of different types of digital properties.
I'm James Yancey. Ignition One's been around over a decade. We took an ad management platform in the industry you may be familiar with called Search Ignite, and a behavioral scoring platform called Net Mining, and basically combine those two components. So you're managing your ads, but you're also very closely scoring propensity to convert data once they actually come to your site. So we look at all channels for management, Facebook, search, display. But more importantly, we do the modeling to kind of show you once you're driving those people to your website, what is the effectiveness, what's the return rate, and how do you plan your media thereof.
Cool. So first of all, just want to get some data out there, and I've talked to Michael about this. We also just saw some in a great presentation by Eli Goodman from ComScore about the rise of social media as a display platform. But can you quickly sort of recount some of what we were talking about in terms of how it's taking over the world, apparently?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no doubt, and I think we were hearing it this morning, and we'll continue to hear it throughout the day. And it's always in the news that social media platforms are continuing to grow very rapidly. And I think we say social media, but in many cases we mean Facebook. But I was just trying to do a little research just to see how quickly this came on, and I think going back just 4.5 years, you only had 1.5% of total display impressions actually occurring on Facebook. And now it's over 30% of total display. So, I think that the premise here is that undoubtedly that there's been a significant shift over to social for display. And that is, I think, without a doubt the case. And the question really remains, is it at the expense of all the other platforms, or is it just coming because there is just a significant rise in total display impressions overall? So I don't personally have the answer to that, but I think it's a really interesting point that we should be thinking about too.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get into that. And the very topic that you raise is kind of, we're questioning the premise a little bit here, which I like to do. It's very transgressive. How distinct are they really? Because there is a good amount of overlap, is there not, between social platforms and, for example, portals, other platforms, non-social environments? What are we seeing there?
I'd like to chime in. Can I ask a question of the audience? How many people here have actually done a Facebook ad buy? I want to meet you guys. To answer your question, I mean, there's let's be realistic. There's 600 million people on Facebook. I don't know how many are precisely active, but I'm biased. We've been doing Facebook ad buys, and now we're doing stuff around the display. And the reality is when you put social into an ad unit, and it literally, your friends can see that someone has interacted with that, it's a game changer. The graph has changed the way communication interaction around ads is occurring, and it's phenomenal. Who's used sponsor stories? Okay, a few. Are you getting some success? What's your, just real quick, what was your highest engagement? Can you give us some numbers?
I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we just recently started playing with them a little bit, experimenting, and it's been effective for amplifying email marketing campaigns and things like that.
That's awesome.
So anyone else seen sort of like the rise of social-enabled advertising? Are you working with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a blend of social and display, without a doubt. I mean, the display ads that we work with, almost, the majority of them have some social component, very often Twitter, something with Facebook, and there's sort of a flow in and out of the ad, and it's a way to think of whether it's display in social or social in traditional display. The line is really hard to draw within a campaign where they stop very often.
Yeah, we take a little different look at it. Social is not the end game. Getting social in the ad, not the end game. Being relevant to the consumer is the end game. So to the extent that social is indicating what they're talking about, what they're interested, what they're buying, and you can pick up the social signals, and you can even pick up content from social and put it in there and make that ad jump out and become less invisible than most of the display advertising out there. That's, that's how we kind of look at it and try and merge it.
you mentioned invisibility. Is that a? Let's talk about that, because there's a supposedly, again, the premise of the panel is that there's a competitive advantage to social advertising. What is the alternative, the bad side? Are we seeing a lot less response to display?
Yeah, I would say this is not just a display problem. This is a media problem, and it's not just an advertising problem. It's a content problem, especially in the younger demographics. They don't pay attention to media anymore. They're doing more of it. They're 81 hours a week, which is more than they sleep or work. But they're not paying attention to the media. The TV's a log fire in the background. They've got 3 screens on at the same time, continuous partial attention. And so whether it's display that they've trained their mind not to see on the sites that they go to, or TV that's just, like I said, background noise to them. It used to be that they could, if they weren't interested in a commercial, they could go get a drink or fast forward through it. Now they just shift their eyes to the other 2 devices they're working on. The commercials, some break now on TV is almost a relief, so you can get back to what you were doing and texting and doing whatever else you're doing. And so display every media is suffering this inundation, the fact that media has become so much more important, so much more prevalent in their life, and then at the same time, they're getting hit so many more times. I saw a stat, I think it's the average person sees 1,100 ads per day across. How many of those do you remember? And so
not a single one, actually, usually.
Exactly. So when you do combine contextualness, relevance, and value in your advertising, that does pop. We see campaign after campaign that does pop, and so that's how we use social to try and get to that relevance factor.
And I was just going to say, when we also, particularly talking about display and effectiveness, we do a lot of retargeting and remarketing, right? And one of the things we actually looked at was when you retarget visitors, so someone's a client's website, they left and went to another website, we showed effectiveness of retargeted display that was shown on Facebook versus effectiveness of retargeted display that's shown on other websites. So again, someone comes to a client website, they leave, and then let's say they go to CNN.com or they go to Facebook, and we show the same ad. We actually see that there's a lot of additional engagement by propensity scoring on Facebook, meaning they're spending more time on the website, they're reading more content, but actually the traditional ads that have been shown on a regular website still convert more visitors. So I think a large portion of this conversation is also about the context of what you're trying to achieve with your display ad, whether it's branding, whether it's conversion, and I think the destination has a lot to do with the whole idea of social, whether it's delivering back to a traditional website or to Facebook itself to show an ad.
There was an eMarketer report that came out about some of the top tier brands using display to drive to Facebook specifically, and I'm sure everyone in the audience has seen a lot of the display ads driving people directly back to, let's say, a Facebook page. And the primary reason for that is that when a brand puts a piece of content into their feed, and to the point Jeff was making, is that consumers that engage will get that information will get organically spread. The problem is that content's not being seen. If you do the math on any page out there, even some of the pages that have, let's say, 1 million followers, their physical engagement on a per content basis is very, very low. So that's a great indicator of, hey, it's valuable content, but I've got to get that content external to my feed now to get exposure to another composition to get them back in and re-engage. If there's not a re-engagement point, you're not going to get beyond those first initial people that saw it, commented on it, and then it fizzles out. So there's a reposting as well as redistribution strategy that really works well. And to the point where we're talking with Flight, putting that trending content, what gets hot, putting it in a display ad and then getting it out to scale to a composition really fundamentally works, because now you're creating exposure to what's relevant.
And we take a rather simplistic approach to the whole thing, because for us, relevance is extremely important, as Jeff was talking about, and that ultimately is what's going to inspire some engagement. So for us, when we think about doing a campaign that is highly targeted to a very, very specific audience segment, and then isolated in its distribution to a very tight geography, and then done in 80 markets simultaneously, for us we need reach, and we need targetability, and we need a relatively low cost to be able to deliver to that user in a really powerful way. And so, for us, the platforms themselves just give us access to that audience, and then it's really about making sure that the messaging itself is relevant as well.
Cool. We touched on this just now, but I'd like to explore it a little bit more. Do ads perform differently in social versus non-social environments? And how can advertisers play to the strengths of the social environment, given those differences?
If your ad sucks on Facebook, it's going to suck everywhere else.
Succinct.
We were just talking about retargeting. One of the things we also look at is we look at cross-channel effects. So obviously there's a lot of data from the Insights API on Facebook in terms of what they're doing within the walled garden. But there's also a whole other story on their side, which is when they come from the ads to actual websites, again, what is engagement? So I think one of the things to think about is if you're a brand, how you own the relationship and you kind of keep it within a protected loop, meaning that when we see people that come from Facebook ads and they later come back to the site, the way they come back to the site is primarily directly to the site or back through Facebook versus something like search. And you sort of think about the implications of that. If you look at other channels, people are still at a later date coming back through search. And so if you're a brand, one of the advantages of social is if you have the relationship, you're kind of creating this continuous loop where they're coming back to the site, they're coming back through Facebook. It's more of a discovery engine, so they're not looking at competing brands. Whereas you come back through other channels, they're still ultimately coming back to a much greater percentage through search. So they're seeing a myriad of other brands that maybe they weren't considering. So I think that loop is something for brands to consider, and how open or closed that is and what are the advantages.
Can I pull the audience again? How many people here are using Facebook tabs as a primary landing spot for your ad? One? Oh, come on. All right. So have you noticed that converts better than sending directly off-site? Awesome.
That actually touches on the next. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that,
Pick up on that, but.
in that sense, are the ads and the landing, the tabs in that case, are they both updated very frequently? I mean, one of the changes in social is the type of media or the content is very dynamic, and having ads that fit in that context and that same sort of temporal pattern is something that we've seen really helps engagement and performance. So it's, to the point of if your ad sucks, it's going to suck on Facebook. Well, if your ad's relevant, because of time, or relevant because of context, it's also going to be better both on and off of Facebook. And I'm curious if
Can you explain the mechanics of that a little bit,
yeah,
or
so,
why that is?
You make an ad, and whether you're running it on social or you're running on display, what's the lifespan of it? Is it sort of a fixed asset in time where you're just creating a flash file or an image or a message and expecting it to last 3 months, or are you thinking a bit more like you think about social? I mean, when you think about social, you think about posts, you think about updates, you think about context, you think about what's going on now in real time, like Jeff was mentioning. And if your ad, whether it's a sort of static ad or if it's a very deep dynamic ad, if that changes in time, and it changes in time at the same sort of cadence as the landing page, whether it's the tab or a different microsite, performance should be better. What we see is engagement is better, and we see a lot more interaction, and we see the end result, or whatever the KPI of the campaign, is reached better.
Cool.
I'll just add, from an investment standpoint, we saw Eli's presentation from ComScore, and you can see what brands are making significant investments in socially enabled units, whether they're actually published in a social environment or not, and which brands are really investing in being present within a social environment. And after his session, I asked him, what's happening with some of the retail brands, those who are really trying to drive a conversion, really trying to either have you purchase online or run into a store and buy something. And their investments are really low. And he didn't necessarily attribute that to, at least from their research, to them being behind the 8 ball. It's just they're not seeing necessarily those conversions. So if you're really investing and trying to drive people to go and make an e-commerce transaction, at least in our experience, we haven't necessarily seen that play out significantly well within the social socially published units.
I'm going to come back to the e-commerce question, but I'm also interested by something you just brought up, which is the big brands. How many big brands are making these big investments? Now, Eli showed us, Mars was big, Kraft was big. I'm wondering though, are they worried? Are big brands worried still about it being a brand safe environment or not? I mean, because that is still, I feel like it's when we first started writing about social media, I don't know, 5 years ago, or as an advertising platform, one of the big questions was, it's user-generated content. Oh my God, it could be anything. Like, God knows what it would be. Like, have those issues been resolved, and are there controls in place now? Do you think sufficient controls for the big social media sites or the small ones that allow brands to feel safe there? I'm just curious what your take on it is.
Big brands are always concerned about that, and so you certainly don't want to be around the wrong content, and it always causes a massive fire drill when you are. And
so it does
it's very
happen.
painful. It happens all the time. Yeah, it will always be, and specifically when you in an uncontrolled environment, you're going to run the risk and the controls, but you'll never get it 100%. So it's an issue, but it's certainly overcomable by the effectiveness and the relevance factor, but it'll always be in the background.
So what we've seen is, I would say, you said 5 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, 1 out of 10 idea would get through the sort of filter, and maybe it's 1 out of 5 now. There's definitely, one of the biggest changes though is how much, when you're working closely with brands, how many just people on staff actually, have it as their day-to-day job or in their title to work on social. And so you can definitely see that the appetite is there, the energy's there, they're putting time and money into it, and that's a big change, just qualitatively.
And the audience is there. I mean, that's what we were talking about. And it's almost inevitable. You have to be where the people are. And you have 800 million people on Facebook, kind of. But what are they putting on Facebook is the question, I guess.
Can I ask another one? So who here in the audience has open walls where they allow their consumers to post on their wall directly? Good. And so is it a moderation challenge? No?
Hasn't been too problematic at all. I think one of the advantages of Facebook is people are tied to their real identity, so that does a lot of inherent filtering. Like we even switched over, I work for Mixer, we switched over our in-house commenting system to Facebook comments a while ago, and one of the big advantages of that was all the, you suck and all the trolling type comments diminished dramatically because everything is tied back to a person.
On the other hand, Kathy was talking about Chapstick, and they apparently are a little bit reluctant to allow criticism on their on their Facebooks. Was it a Facebook page?
Yeah, apparently. Oh, I think this is off. Hold on a second. Well, I don't know what's going on.
Sorry.
No, apparently the people were saying bad things about this one ad, and they were actually deleting the comments, which of course just pleased people immeasurably. They were so happy. So it started out with an ad that somebody thought was offensive, but was so, to me, mildly offensive. And it was of a woman's butt. So if anybody's going to be offended, it should be another woman. And I'm like, really? And then when people started to say negative things about the ad, and then they start, the comments started to get deleted. Well, then the issue becomes you're deleting my comments. I mean, it's just you couldn't play it, you couldn't play it more badly, I guess.
Yeah. And they're going to say that anyway. That's the conventional wisdom, is that the people will be saying this somewhere. Moving on, and we just touched on this, when is it appropriate to drive people to a social environment, and when is it appropriate to drive them to like a non-social or perhaps less social environment, like a brand microsite or something like that? Because there's a whole art and science of this, I know.
I'm curious on who's using brand microsites today. If you're not putting, so we got one in back? How's it working? Are you using social to drive traffic to it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the common wisdom around Facebook for a retailer is, if the experience is exclusive and different than what you'd have on your standard site, then it makes sense to try to drive them back to a social environment so you have some sort of preferred or special relationship. But inherently, I can tell you there is a conflict in the mind of most retailers now, which is as they think about more social plugins and things, they all want to have a social site, right? If you ask them, they know that they have to based on what you said. That's where the people are, so they want to be in the space. They want to be social. But inherently, a lot of retailers are starting to question and feel like maybe they're an affiliate back to Facebook, right? Because someone comes to their site, they're looking for a pair of jeans. They saw that their friend liked the pair of jeans, and then suddenly they saw that their sister's girlfriend went on a date last night, and 3 hours later they realized they never purchased the pair of jeans. So there is an inherent conflict there in terms of like owning that attention and keeping someone actually focused on a transaction on your site versus a social experience, which can lead to distraction. And so I think, to answer your question, I think for most retailers, they have to have a very specific reason, an exclusive reason to drive them to Facebook different than their primary site. And if they're going to drive them to the primary site, oftentimes then once they get them there, the goal has to be to keep them there. And I think sometimes, more recently, retailers have been confused on the goal of, if I get them to my site, the goal is to convert them and keep them in that environment. If I take them to my Facebook store, the goal is to interact with them, and maybe they do, focus on gossip about their sister's brother's wife. But those are really kind of two different objectives.
Sure.
So just one more option, since it's what we do, is really to turn a display ad into I'll say, socially charged microsite itself. And really turn that display buy into a window onto something else, and that should be a microsite-like experience. It should be a social experience, and you're seeing that it's increasingly popular is to bring both of those elements together outside on the web.
Can you explain a little bit? Can you give an example, like
Sure.
how one does that?
You use Flight. No. So what we do
First of all, go to us.
Is so what you do, and you're seeing this more with other ads as well, is if you think about, all of us have phones in our pockets that have these rich app-like experiences. And if you think of that app format, it's really not much different than a 300 by 250, certainly not a 300 by 600 ad. And so what you can do as a brand is build up an ad unit that has tabs and content and is rich and interactive just like a microsite, and serve it up through ad servers and buys, and serve it up and also in social buys. And
you can put it on your Facebook landing tab too.
You can. But so basically there's just the wall is disappearing in the same way that you embed Facebook into your site, and you were talking about that experience. You can kind of take control of it the other way and put it in your ads, and since you're in control of the buy, it's powerful.
I'm actually, I promise not to put people on the spot, but I'm curious, Jeff, what your take is on the social, when is it appropriate to drive to social, when is it appropriate to drive to some other destination, since you're the media agency guy?
I'll be lame on this and say it depends.
That's not lame, it's true, probably.
I think we're seeing smart marketers take advantage of Facebook in a lot of different ways, and so I've seen companies that want to turn over all of their couponing onto Facebook. So all their efforts are trying to get their fans right now to his mass audience, because they want to turn off all their other couponing platforms and just use Facebook as a streamlined way to get coupons out to them, which I think is very smart and maybe the best use of fans I've seen so far, or converting them into something valuable. I think that I have a proclivity to what Flight does in not trying to send people anywhere and trying to do a lot of the hard work right where they are. And so if the ad that kind of blew me away was the Comcast one that you guys had built, which was you could program your DVR through a display ad. And for the program.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Time Warner.
Yeah. Sorry, Time Warner. Sorry, buddy.
He still
so it wasn't a great branding ad, but it was a great.
Sorry, I felt I had to correct it.
But when you start to think about the display advertising and the ability for it to serve as a utility and as an app, as opposed to something that just drives you to another place, I think that model is much more efficient. And so I think if you're trying to use Facebook or you're trying to use social as a platform for taking on other business needs, such as couponing, such as, like I think it is, if it's just going to be another place to do branding or just another place to do this, I think you can make a case that either place that you send them, you're going to be able to deliver a similar experience. I'm
seeing that there's just an innate melding occurring, and where we're going to very shortly here see where it would be ridiculous to send someone to a page that doesn't have all the social share functions. And when you go to, let's say, a piece of content, I mean, there's not a piece of content I've yet to see today, unless they're just stupid, where you're not have a social share or some social function is built in to get that content out to your friends, to create engagement. Now we are having it baked into ads. Now on the landing tab, you can create that same experience. So I think that melding is occurring, and I don't know if there's really a differentiation. At the end of the day, content and engagement is a soft sell to conversion. Because I don't think a brand is just putting a page up just to have fun. They're doing it to sell product. I mean, they're trying to move, at the end of the day, CMO sitting at the table, looking at a spreadsheet, saying, how many units did you get? And I think the conversation is getting beyond the, how many likes did you get us today? If you're not doing a calculation on your engagements, like you're paying for likes, you need to reassess what you're doing, because if you're not calculating on how much engagement you're getting, then you're spending an inordinate amount of money on your engagement costs. And that's really where the model is. And currently today, Twitter is now charging on what's called a CPE. We're part of the beta on that, and it's really cool because you are truly paying on the engagement.
It is interesting.
I think, James, you made a really good point a few minutes ago that we've got to be obviously very mindful of the objectives for any particular campaign, and as such, you're going to make different decisions about the media environment and the creative execution. But I think in general, we've got to be really careful about distracting our target consumer from the prime directive, which is in the end to sell product. But what is it at that moment? So if you're a brand and your goal at this phase of the campaign is to really build a fan base that you can remarket to them in an expensive way, then obviously you're going to drive people to your your social pages. If the goal is to get them to go buy the widget right now, naturally you're going to deploy different techniques and be in a different environment. So to me, it is an it depends sort of answer, unfortunately, but I don't feel like it's as confusing if you can break down who the audience is and what you want them to do and what you want them to do today versus tomorrow, and the steps become fairly straightforward from there in terms of environment and creative.
I think it depends is always a fair answer. It means that there's some subtle differentiation rather than a sweeping one-size-fits-all. Chase mentioned, not paying for likes or likes being not a very good proxy for anything. Where are we in terms of social media ROI and for display and for everything? Do you think people have grappled with that effectively? I mean, likes, acknowledging that likes are probably insufficient.
Let me chime in. So we got engaged with the project with NBC and the primary objective was to drive more engagement on their Facebook page. Because at the end of the day, they were posting out great content, getting great social interaction, but it was attenuating, as it normally does for every single brand out there. So since we had access to the I1 network and the NBC network, we were able to run house ads. So we teamed up with Flight to do what's called a trending content ad. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted to drive traffic back to the best of the best content. So when we ran those house ads literally on the primary main site, we were getting a phenomenal 2% CTR. It's a source of discovery. We were seeing on average, people were seeing between 3 to 5 pieces of new content. And that's hot. When we ran that same unit across the I1 network, we were getting 0.45, and we have a case study out about that. That's ROI, folks. And it created a very primary objective, and that was to drive more traffic back to the site, and it was very calculatable because of the premium that they're charging their advertiser to display on the site. sounds like pretty good. Yeah.
So one company has a handle on ROI. What you're going to say?
Yeah, I think when you look, I don't think anybody's nailed this yet, but I think the direction that you need to look at is people who, if your network consumes predominantly a specific brand, an Apple, if you're an Apple person, if you're a Google person, we've seen this across industry. We've seen this across packaged goods. We've seen this across fast food. We've seen it in financial services and very prominent in technology. If your network is predominantly, your social grid is predominantly consuming one brand, you have a much higher propensity to buy a product from that company. And that just makes sense if you just think about it in your regular life. If I know Chase and I think he's a smart guy and he has a certain phone or a certain camera that he likes, then I'll have a propensity to buy that one. That's amplified with the social grids now. And so to get people to like your brand and to publish that to their social grid, it has a ripple effect and it has a multiplier effect beyond just, a one-to-one relationship with you and that company. Them going out to their 500 friends and saying, I like this is important. And it's quantifiable in the aggregate, but I don't think we've mastered yet how to harness that effect. And so when we do our media campaigns, we really do try not only to hit the target audience, not only try to engage the target audience, but then to incentivize them to share that. And if you can hit those three levels, then you've really got yourself a great media campaign.
When you talk about engagement, I think it's also, there's definitely an evolving conversation definition of what is engagement and what does that mean and how do you measure it. I think, when we see people that come from viral sources or fan pages that actually come to the client's website, they're over twice as engaged as people who come from paid click Facebook ads, which makes sense. But I think the other part of the conversation is thinking about implicit and explicit data for engagement, meaning like, explicit would be I filled out this lead form or I posted this piece of content, et cetera. But the implicit would be how much time am I spending and what am I looking at? And even if I didn't actually press a button or post a piece of content, where am I spending my time and how do you actually value that? And so I think there's also a theme here that says, the advantage of Facebook is you can see all these social metrics. The disadvantage is you don't have deep analytics from Facebook in terms of actually seeing where they were on the Facebook page and what they're actually spending time on, et cetera, to use that for analytics. So I think that's something just to think about over time is there's brands who do advanced work with the implicit data, which is regardless of what they said in their lead form or what button they pushed, where were they spending time and what do we assume they were consuming? And on Facebook right now, you can't really do that. So I think you may be getting a lot of Facebook followers or fans, Twitter followers or Facebook fans. And in fact, those people may be spending a ton of time on your page or on your website, but you can't see that data. You don't have that engagement data. So I think that's a different aspect as well to think about.
Do you think that there's any chance they will eventually start sharing that data, which admittedly might creep people out even more? But do you think are they moving in that direction? Do you know?
We would like them to. I don't, who knows? Fingers crossed.
I'll let them
right?
know.
Yeah, sure.
James Yancey wants more information. Shall we open it up for questions from the audience? We already asked you a couple questions, but
okay.
Feel free to turn it around.
Do we have some questions here?
Oh, come on.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right, Chase. Rile them up.
You guys have a question?
Okay.
Chase, you already asked him questions throughout the whole thing.
Right.
They're burnt out. You burnt
them out.
Oh, so it's all Chase's
Chase, do you have a
fault.
question?
Yeah.
I do have a question. I have a question in the audience. Who here in the audience is using display media currently right now to drive traffic to their Facebook page? Should definitely try it out. One? I want to talk to you. Okay.
I'm just curious, you asked the question, like what?
Because I'm just curious because right now we're seeing a lot of other brands doing that, and I'm just curious in the audience here if anyone is actually physically doing it. It's one thing to read it on eMarketer and Mars and Coca-Cola and blah 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 are doing it, but is anyone else doing it? So good to hear that you are.
Well, I kind of wondered what sort of pushback you get when you're doing a display ad, pushing on some other site, pushing people towards your Facebook page when Facebook is also the one that is eating up all the attention and traffic. I wonder, is that a problem, or other publishers just want your money and they're just not gonna sweat the detail that you're sending them? I mean, there's always been the issue of sending people off the site, but Facebook is sort of like the 800-pound gorilla. You're not sending them to a microsite.
Well, some ways, your Facebook page is becoming like a homepage, and the landing tab is a interactive microsite. So yeah, I mean, I think publishers, at least the ones we're talking to, are very cognitive of the fact that Facebook is taking share from an ad dollar perspective, which is a problem for them. That requires them to be smarter and savvier. I don't know if there's a publisher today that's not using Facebook to drive, or Twitter to drive traffic back to their page. So it's very incestuous. Personally, I think it's a challenge to be a publisher at this time and trying to sell ads when you're competing against a social graph that has 800 million people. So yeah, you're going to have to be more socially integrated to compete.
Speaking for a very large publisher, and probably out of turn because there's probably somebody else at Time Inc. who should address this kind of question, but I think they're eager to get the ad buy, and they're not so concerned about the click-through, frankly. So there is the exponential effect of driving somebody onto a property that is also in the business of trying to earn those same ad dollars, but I don't think they have the luxury of the opinion right now. They ultimately just want to ultimately execute the program, and that's the best that some of these publishers can do. The basic premise that we started with was, where are people, and that's where advertising dollars will typically go. And there's not a lot that some of the bigger publishers can do about how Facebook will grow. All they can do is focus on trying to grow their own audience too.
But Facebook is not a content creator. They don't create content. And at the end of the day, content is the honey that drives action.
But whether it's curated content, content produced by an editorial organization like Time Inc. or content produced by friends and family, it's how that content is perceived and valued by the audience that you want to reach. And so, Time Inc. naturally is an organization that's very, very dedicated to high quality editorial content, and that is extremely important and strong for the brand. But if someone's going to spend 3.5 hours wondering about the gossip from the party last night, and they're going to spend 6 minutes checking out some of the top news stories, that's just a reality that we have to deal with, kind of regardless of where the content comes from.
Yeah, I mean, publishers are under more pressure than ever, so they're not in a position to say no to some degree. But on the other side, we're seeing publishers are getting much more creative and innovative and coming up with good ad products themselves. And very often that will have a social blend. We're also seeing, one of our very early partners was someone we haven't really talked about much in here, but LinkedIn. LinkedIn, we're doing some very innovative things, combining their social content with other social content and selling it to advertisers. Actually, they were the first major publishing customer we had and pulled us into this industry exactly for that. And it's great to see that innovation kind of push back on the challenge.
Yeah, so I want to take Chase's question and ask it of Jeff, because you brought up, I guess, a real-world example where you had a client tasked you to get likes, so it's like a central couponing kind of channel. In being tasked to generate all those likes, how much did display outside of Facebook play into that campaign? How much of it was sponsored story, marketplace ads, and was display successful if it was in the play?
Yeah, so we used display outside of Facebook. The display was completely Facebook enabled and drove back to a Facebook fulfillment. Obviously, you had to go to the site to be able to fulfill on it. So it was all integrated, and mostly outside of Facebook, actually, the display advertising.
Just curious, if you were to try to pull that off directly on Facebook, you think that it would have been a 2-4x more expense? Because if you would have said, no, we're not going to do display, but we'll do the same thing, but let's do the buy on Facebook Direct.
I don't know. I'm not that intimate with the pricing on it, so I'd have to find out. But my gut would say no, it wouldn't be as expensive. But we were trying to do more than just drive likes too. We were doing a lot of branding, and so we
branding engagement.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Okay. I think we're in good shape. Oh wait.
One more.
Sorry.
One
Sorry
more.
about that. I didn't look that far.
I was just wondering from the panel if you could give us some examples of what brands you think are doing a really great job on Facebook, and maybe some of the less obvious, like not Apple, but some other brands that have done some interesting things.
Red Bull.
Why?
They are crushing it from a content perspective. Not only are they going out there and sponsoring super influencers, which is the Red Bull athletes, but they're creating just incredibly cool content that, and they have a whole team. Now, obviously, not every brand can pull this off, but they're really going out there and making the best content that is what we call likable content. It's shareable. It's conversational, and it's hitting all the trigger points that their target, from a desire perspective, they're going for. So if you look at their engagement numbers and you look at the physical number of properties they've segmented across their brand, it's not just one channel, it's multiple channels. And please check out The Art of Flight. That's just an incredibly executed site, great content, incredible content. They did a 8-city rollout of this snowboarding, extreme boarding, and it's epically done well.
A quick follow-up question to Jeff. So if in that particular campaign, a lot of the display ads were outside of Facebook, can you give another example when the strategy was to do more or heavily lean on display ads on Facebook?
Give an example of what? Of
Another client campaign where you were tasked to achieve maybe likes or something else where you said, okay, we're going to heavily lean on display ads on Facebook as opposed to outside of it?
So you're looking for a comparison of what display outside versus for driving likes?
You got that challenge to build the likes for couponing, and you just said that you ran a lot of display ads outside of Facebook, going back to Facebook. Completely separate, can you give an example when you were given a challenge and you said that display ads on Facebook has to be more significant or a bigger part of the strategy?
Okay, be quick. We're going to have to wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anywhere I just isolated it just on Facebook, and I don't think we've.
Or more a larger piece of it, because it sounded like the majority of it was outside. I'm curious if there's any real-world examples where you saw something where like we're going to lean heavily on display ads on Facebook.
You know, we've leaned heavily. I have to actually look at the percentage of impressions. But we've definitely leaned heavily, and worked a lot with display in Facebook, and have not found a huge amount of success just on that avenue. So I think, performance-wise, that doesn't mean that's not a blanket statement. That's a campaign. That's an objective. That's certain. But no, we definitely haven't seen huge, startling success in click-through rates or sign-ups or likes or anything like that just by running display in Facebook.
Already.
And I could just throw you one to think about as we walk off stage here. Is we did a campaign for an e-commerce transaction where it was a blend of different types of publishers, including Facebook, where we drove them out of Facebook to go and actually buy something online. So I think the environment is obviously really important, and the click-through destination doesn't necessarily have to always drive back to to some sort of level of engagement on Facebook or others.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry to we can take this out in the hall too if you guys if you guys want to do that, or at lunchtime, which is after the next panel. So I want to thank our panelists
Thank you all.
For providing some color to that question.